Gwilym, it must be at least a day since I've seen you, mate.
Oh, I know, but the hours have dragged since our last
Have
meeting.
they? Was it so exciting to see me in the flesh yesterday?
It was really good fun. Guildford, a lot going on in Guildford, more than I ever knew. Very fond of it. I like it.
It rains a lot in Guildford, is my experience.
Yeah, definitely. £14 for an umbrella now. Don't talk to me about inflation.
I think, do you not have a coat with a hood, which is what I had?
I didn't plan well.
No. But no, it was great. It was great to see you in person.
Oh, shush.
We put the worlds to rights, didn't we?
No, there's a lot to be done. And I think the world of IP might be a little bit better now.
Yeah, I was going to say SEPA is slightly more stable and slightly more even-keeled now that we've had the opportunity for you and I to meet in a darkened room and get everything sorted.
How was your meeting afterwards?
Oh yeah, so afterwards I went off to have a little conversation with a parliamentarian. I won't say too much about it because it's a piece of work that we're doing behind the scenes to try and make sure that the future of the profession is secured and stable and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, that went really, really well. Thank you for asking.
Good to hear. Very pleased about that.
You get home safely, or did anything happen to you on the way back?
No, a very, very uneventful ride, and then I dropped into Pret. Little plug there for Pret.
You had a massive lunch.
I know. I needed a drink. I was thirsty.
Oh, don't drink. I thought you went for a sandwich.
A quick sandwich. A hoisin wrap. Pret hoisin wrap every time.
Every time.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the Two IPs in a Pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Anyway, we're meandering too much this time, aren't we? We probably ought to get our guest on because otherwise she might leave, and that would be a disaster.
Yeah, we can keep talking about favourite sandwiches.
Oh yeah, we can once we get Elizabeth on. So we've got Elizabeth Rimmer with us today. Elizabeth is Chief Executive of LawCare, a charity that SEPA, I can't remember how we bumped into one another, Elizabeth, but we did. And SEPA joined a number of years ago now, and I'm very pleased to belong we are. Do you want to introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. Thanks very much, Lee. I'm Elizabeth Rimmer. As you've already heard, I'm the Chief Executive at LawCare. We are a charity that support and promote mental health and wellbeing across the legal profession. And Lee, I think we met via Kevin Bader at SITMA.
Was it his fault?
Yes, it was his fault. I met Kevin at a leaving do for the former Chief Executive at Silex. And I've forgotten her name. And I was introduced to him then. And I think it was through Kevin that I met you.
That sounds about right. I do actually remember going with Kevin to that. So I would have been.
Oh, well, maybe I met you there as well then.
Yeah,
we were both there. It was Helen Whiteman. I don't know.
That's it, Helen.
Yeah,
that's right.
So she introduced us, yes.
At that rather lovely venue that I want to say was the Artillery something or other, but I might be mistaken.
Oh,
anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe.
Yeah. totally irrelevant to the work that you do. So, how do we kick this off? Do you want to give us? It's your anniversary year, isn't it? So
it is. It's LawCare's 25th anniversary. So we were set up in 1997, and I think at that time, I don't think perhaps there would have been a vision that we would still be around and have grown bigger to cover all of the legal profession, because our roots at the beginning were very much with solicitors just in England and Wales. And there was a worry about how much solicitors were drinking and using alcohol as an unhealthy coping mechanism for the pressures of life in the law.
My natural reaction there was to snigger a little bit. And then I immediately thought to myself that was the wrong thing to do, because I do know that it is an escape for lots of people, probably me included, actually.
Well, I think alcohol is sort of seen as, it's legal, it's socially acceptable. It's sort of the drug of choice for people if they're needing a sort of self-medication and a way of unwinding from the pressures of a busy day. But actually, it often can lead to bigger problems than just that when it becomes a dependency. So that's really where we had our roots, was in alcohol. And then since then, we have grown wider to cover all the jurisdictions in the UK and all the different branches of the legal profession. So we're not just solicitors. Patent.
Who had the vision to bring it into being? What's the story behind?
Interestingly enough, I've just been rereading all of that. We grew out of an initiative. There was something called the Lawyers Support Group, which ran in the early 90s, which was actually an American organization that developed over here. It's a way of bringing lawyers together who had a problem with alcohol to talk with each other. So we had our early roots in that. And I believe the story is that a story was put in the Law Society's Gazette by the then president, Charles Ely, saying, was anybody interested in helping to set up a more formal support for lawyers with alcohol problems? And that's where it all started. So it was through an initiative, I guess, of the Law Society of England and Wales, recognizing that there were some problems, and that's how it all began. So the early part of the history was in the early 1990s, and then by 97 we were established as an independent charity to sort of pick up that work of the Lawyer Support Group.
No, quite interesting. So were you called LawCare from the very beginning, out of interest?
No, so at the beginning we were called LawCare because we supported solicitors, and then it was quickly changed to LawCare. Within a couple of years, I think there'd been outreach to the bar, the judiciary, Silex, then the other jurisdictions, Northern Ireland and Scotland. So as we moved away from just just supporting solicitors, we changed our name to LawCare.
Okay, the care bit was quite fortunate though. So that's kind of scaled nicely to a much wider remit now, which is... Yes,
it did. And I think at the beginning, the first year we were in operation, it was a retired solicitor who was in recovery from alcohol himself, who ran LawCare from his kitchen table and answered all the phone calls. He took 60 calls in the first year, just on his own. And then after a year, an admin supporter was brought in, who's still with us. Our support manager was the very first administrator for LawCare back in 1998. She's our longest serving member of staff. It was very much focused on providing that emotional support. And obviously, over time, what we do in terms of support is a core part of our work, but increasingly we are also doing more work around advocacy. It's, to sort of misquote Desmond Tutu, we don't want to just be pulling people out of the river when they're drowning. We want to stop them falling in the first place. So we're trying to combine both of those aspects, supporting people when they need it, but doing more upstream to sort of try and fix some of the challenges we have in the way we work in law that can undermine people's mental health and well-being.
I was having a little look around the website in preparation for this, and I was looking at I think it's you call it your people, your teams. The staff team, reasonably straightforward. You have a kind of cracking group of people, obviously, who work for LawCare. But then I just kept scrolling and scroll. There is a huge list of people that are involved, either in a governance capacity as trustees, or then I think you call them your champions.
Yeah.
And there's just a huge number of people that I recognise some faces, which was good, including Andrea Brewster, who's really active patent attorney, particularly around diversity and inclusivity. How do you become a champion, and what do all these people do?
Well, so we have an army of volunteers to support us in our work. Obviously, we have trustees, we have champions. I'll talk a little bit about them in a sec. And then we also have about 90 volunteers who are people who provide direct emotional support, either through our telephone helpline. We have about 20 people who are volunteers that answer the helpline Monday to Friday. And then we have about another 70 who are peer supporters. So if somebody contacts us, say you are facing a disciplinary investigation in the workplace, or you're returning to work after being off sick and you feel like you might benefit from some additional one-to-one support, we'll try and match you with somebody who's had a similar experience. So you can talk to another legal professional who's been through a similar set of circumstances as you, because it can be very difficult when you're in a tough place to actually think there's light at the end of the tunnel, or I'm going to get through this. So by talking to someone who's been through that, it can be very reassuring that you're not alone and that you can come out the other side. So those are our army of volunteers that provide our support service work. And then our champions, people like Andrea Brewster, are people that we use to help us with advocacy. So people that are already really interested in mental well-being, diversity, improving the culture in law, people that we knew that we just approached. So I probably emailed Andrea and said, I know Andrea well. We've done quite a lot of things together. The champions we have so far are people that we've directly approached, but we are actually thinking of reviewing our champions program to see if we could widen that a little bit. So we have about 30 champions who we also use for speaking engagements and for attending events and roundtables. So because we're increasingly getting more requests to do things like this, podcasts and panels, sometimes we'll turn to our champions and say, would you be interested in doing this? Because often, hearing from someone in practice or directly related to your practice area can be more helpful perhaps than just hearing somebody from LawCare speak. So we try to engage a wide range of people to basically go out there and spread the good word about LawCare and why these issues really matter from their own perspective. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to speak then, Gwilym.
Oh, well, I was just sort of stretching, but I did have a question. I thought you were going to speak. What were you doing?
I was waiting for you. Your lips were moving. I was waiting for something to fall out.
It can take a while sometimes. I'm kind of warming them up, loosening them up with a big question. No, it's really interesting. I was going to say it's quite visionary. It started in 1997 with a kind of a mental health charity. It was just not a buzzword. It wasn't something people admitted to. So the origins make a lot more sense because I can see, the booze being forever an issue. When did the kind of transition start becoming? When did people start phoning you up for other reasons than alcohol problems?
Well, I think actually right from the beginning, because I think as you say, back in the 90s, perhaps there wasn't really the vocabulary around mental health that we have now. And although I think sometimes people think some of the issues we're talking about are related to our sort of fast-paced lives in the 21st century, hyper-connected, always on, can never escape a device. Actually, the problems we see in law massively predate the sort of tech age. If you think back to the 90s, it was 1997, no one had email or laptops or mobile phone. I think I got my first mobile phone in 1999. Yeah. And, if you wanted to work late, you either stayed in the office or you carted a lot of paper home with you. Yeah. So, those challenges were there, but perhaps we weren't articulating them. So I think people were fronting up with an alcohol concern. But once you dug into that, you actually saw that the alcohol was really the medication for what the problem was. And so I think what we've done now is we've opened up more about the issues that are leading people to experiencing difficulties. So that I think that transition has been gradual and has also, I guess, in a way moved along with where we've been in society about talking more around mental health. And then, of course, the pandemic has catapulted those discussions because suddenly overnight, we all went into lockdown. And I think many people across the profession and in all workplaces have had to talk more openly about things that were going on for them than perhaps they ever had done in the past. Talked about their vulnerabilities, health concerns, or issues around their families. So it's given us an opportunity to speak up more, I think, the pandemic, because there are probably very few people who haven't over the course of the last 2 years. And we've all had very different experiences. Of course, some people will have been very ill or bereaved, but I think most people have had times over the last 2 years where it's been a struggle. So that's opened it up more for discussion and conversation.
Did you see more people reaching out to you during the pandemic? We're probably still in it, aren't we? Even though we are in denial. Did you see more people reaching out, were they reaching out with different issues?
So we saw a change. So in the first year of 2020, we saw calls and contacts around anxiety more than double, which is to be expected, really. That reflected what we were reading across the national media. So we saw an increase in calls around anxiety and worries about all kinds of things, particularly from people who'd been furloughed. Will I have a job? We had legal professionals calling us who were on furlough, but still being expected to work.
Right.
Big fat no. Yeah, I mean, you'd be quite shocked at some of the things.
I don't think I would be shocked.
Yeah. And then, then of course there was the isolation. I think that although we're now moving into a flexible era, and there are great benefits and learnings from COVID, and I think we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we take the good things forward and not lose sight of them. And that greater flexibility is a big bonus for many people. But on the flip side of that, lots of people really miss the contact with colleagues because of the social isolation. And I think it made us all realize that actually the chit chat, the banter in the office around Netflix, football, Brexit, whatever, were things that people really missed and valued. So we've got lots of calls around that. The social isolation, the lack of supervision was a big problem, particularly for younger legal professionals. Very hard to sort of put your hand up on Zoom and say, I need some help. Much easier when you're in the workplace, pop your head around someone's door, have you got 5 minutes? Or you grab them when you're making a coffee. You can pick your moment, because often as a junior, you have to navigate when is a good time to go and speak to somebody about something. Yeah. So we did see a change. I mean, what we're seeing now, though, is we've actually seen a slight decline in contacts this year. And we're wondering why that is. One theory is maybe because people are working more from home. They are away from some of the things that might have been bothering them on a daily basis. So that's been interesting. But yeah, that was the big change in 2020, was just much more calls around anxiety, social isolation, and the immediate adjustment to working from home and all the concerns that went with that.
You mentioned supervision there, which is something I think that this profession, I think we did we not do a podcast, Lee, about? I think we touched on this in some of the supervision.
We did, yeah. When we had the students on, yeah.
Yeah, and they were talking, I think it was very difficult to do. It's doable, but it's very difficult to do ad hoc, as you say. You've got to be really organised and everything. That's obviously, well, that actually triggers two questions. First one is that you mentioned explicitly, obviously more junior attorney lawyers, those who are in the training process. Going back to our point about mental health being much more vocabulary for it, I think also there's a lot more openness about it in the kind of the millennial generation or whatever. Than I'm a Generation X, and it's a different thing for me. I think of my kind of generation about the opening up about that kind of thing. Do you see any kind of age profile elements to LawCare, or do you get calls from across the spectrum?
So we get a significant, I think it's more than half of our support contacts will come from people in the early stages of their legal career. And we know, backed up, the American Bar Association did a very large study in 2016 of the American legal profession and found that the most vulnerable time in your career is that transition into practice. So sort of stepping up, taking on the weight of responsibility. Usually when you're in training, you are given more supervision because it's required by the training rules that may oversee your branch of the profession. You have to have more check-ins, you have to pass exams, you have to go through stages. And then often when you qualify, that can disappear and suddenly you're left to your own devices. And so it also comes at a time, when you think the average age of qualifying into the legal profession mostly is around your late 20s. It's not people who are 23 or 24. Then that may often be coming at a time when you may be buying your first home, settling down with a partner, maybe starting a family. So there may be other big life events going on at the same time as you're trying to start building your career. And so we do get a lot of calls from the junior end of the profession. And as you may have seen, or some of your listeners may have seen last year, that we did a large study called Life in the Law that we published in September 2021. And in that, we found that we looked at a number of factors across the profession. One of them was burnout. And we found the people that had the highest burnout scores were the age group 26 to 35. So it sort of correlates with our own experience of what we hear through our support channels. And the challenge also, I think, is that part of that legal mindset is it's really difficult to put your hand up and say you're struggling or you feel overwhelmed, because you're worried that that might be seen as a weakness, or you're not good enough, or you're not cut out for it, or it'll be a career limiting step. So it can be hard to say, hang on a minute, I'm not finding this easy, or I need some support. And people often don't speak up for those reasons. So that's a big challenge, that there's a sort of a culture in law that doesn't make it easy to speak up if you are feeling that you're out of your depth and you need some support. And that's, more likely to be the case for people at the beginning of their careers. Because as you progress through your career, you often develop more of a confidence around yourself and your abilities. And we saw the group that had the lowest burnout score were the oldest group that responded to the survey.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's one of our challenges, is that, particularly when we're now looking at the Great Resignation and changing working patterns and quite a lot of attrition from younger people out of the profession. So I think we've got to do a better job about how we welcome and retain people in the legal profession and make this an environment that people want to stay in, because we don't want to be losing people. When you think how, particularly, I think in the patent world, it's a very long, lengthy, intense process to qualify as a patent attorney. I don't know what the attrition figures are like in this branch of the legal profession, but do people move on, or do people tend to stay, or do you lose people in the early stages of their careers?
I think people tend to stay. I think it's important to remember that by the time someone reaches the point where they start to be a trainee patent attorney, they already are developed as a scientist, a technologist, an engineer. So they've invested quite heavily in their development to that point. So I think it's it's not like someone's coming into a career and really kind of grappling with it for the first time. I think they know where they are. They're grounded, and I think that helps attrition. I have absolutely no idea whether the patent profession world tracks the kind of patents that you were talking about there. It would be fascinating to take a bit of a dive into that and find out.
Because I think that's certainly broadly across the legal profession. The generalized position is that you see more attrition in the early part of people's careers than further down the line. And particularly in the solicitor's profession, that 5 to 7 year group are the group most likely to leave.
Yeah, 5 to 7 years is still qualifying for us.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think many people, I think there will be an attrition point. It'll be earlier than that for us, I think. It'll be because massive thing, I would say, empirically, the big issue in this job is the exams, which, of course, as you know, everyone's been through, and they're awful. They're really hard work. There's nothing wrong with how the exams are run. It's just a very tough exam with low pass rates. Now, they always have been, because it's a tough, requiring high quality and everything. So I think if you get through those exams, then in a sense, I think that's the big hurdle. And mostly after that, empirically again, less concern over being able to do the job. I think most people think, well, I've passed that exam, I can do anything. But I think in the first 2 or 3 years, that might be when you think, oh, these massive exams come in, I'm not as interested, this isn't as interesting as it. I thought. I haven't met a single mad inventor. I've not come across any anti-gravity devices. This is a great disappointment. So I think more burnout probably in the first 2 or 3 years for attrition in those early stages, empirically, I'd say. But it's there for sure, and it's awfully stressful when it happens, of course, as well. I actually had another follow-on question, actually, if that's okay, which was about, we talked about the age profile, and that was really, really interesting. And obviously there for everybody, naturally. A lot of the issues you've talked about, things like kind of isolation during the pandemic, to a certain extent, supervision issues and everything, they're not law specific. They can happen across the board. I mean, where do you see where's the legal sector particularly contributing to these issues on top of all the problems we all have?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. I think there's two aspects to that. One is around the legal mindset and thinking styles. And so lawyers' approach tend to have very high standards of their own work, perfectionist tendencies, rumination. So if you have had a meeting with a client, or you've come out of a hearing, a tendency to replay that scenario over and over in your mind, looking for where you went wrong, that inner critic on your shoulder always telling you that you're not good enough, that sense that there's no room for error. And I would imagine in the patent world where you are digesting and having to review such a significant amount of technical material as well, that and you're applying, I would assume, quite a scientific brain as well as a legal brain to looking at things, then that sense that there is no room for anything to go wrong is challenging. Is when mistakes do happen, we generally have a very poor response to error in law. The response is fear and panic and blame, rather than how can we work out what went wrong here. Difficulty in delegating, saying no, that sense of self-sufficiency. I'm better off doing this myself because then I'll know I'll do a good job. So that those sort of, and then of course the high standards that legal professionals are held to by their regulators also adds into that mix. And then you put that into an environment that's high pressure, tight deadlines, reactive, long hours, very competitive, especially in something like the patent attorney world, where you've had to work so hard to get qualified and you've had to keep on chugging away at that. That sense of always having to be on top and make it doesn't help either. So there's lots of those sorts of cultural factors and the legal approach to things. And there's a lot of negative emotion in law as well. It's often about winning and losing. It's about looking at how you mitigate bad things from happening, the risk here, advising people on the steps they need to take to minimize their exposure to other things. So there's often this negative mindset, which can be challenging as well. So all of that sort of leads to almost a perfect storm for some of the challenges that we see. And then when you put that in, a working environment that I've mentioned, but also where long hours is endemic in law, whether you are a family lawyer, a high street criminal practitioner, a patent attorney, people work long hours in the law. And that is a challenge in its well, because sometimes that then means if you don't manage that well, you don't have time to pursue the things that actually help you unwind and relax, or spend time with your family and your hobbies and that kind of thing. So there's some inherent factors within the law that contribute to undermining mental well-being, the work intensity, lack of psychological safety, not feeling able to speak up about mistakes or when things have gone wrong. Supervision, although that's a common problem, I think what you find in law is that we're not really trained. The people that become managers are people who are really good at being their legal professional work day by day. They're not given any training in how to manage people. They're also expected to fear. So you might have a team, but you've also got to bring in the fees and you've got targets to meet. So the first thing that tends to slide off the edge of the desk when you're under pressure is that supervision session with a colleague. And in our Life in the Law survey, we asked people with management responsibilities how many had actually had any training in managing people, and it was less than half. It was 47%. So I think we're not very good at managing people in law, yet people are our greatest asset, because the work of legal work is done in people's minds. Even with the rise of artificial intelligence and using more tech, that's all about how we work smarter. We need to do a better job of managing people. I think that's specifically a problem in the law as well. It's not a recognized, if you worked for Marks and Spencer's or Barclays or EasyJet and you were managing people, you'd be sent on a proper management training program and it would be a recognized step in your career. That doesn't really happen in the law. It may happen in larger firms, but in most law firms and legal practices, that doesn't happen.
Well, now I am feeling anxious.
Well, I've got a good helpline for you. Also, you can contact us on web chat or by email. So,
I mean, it's listening to all of that, Elizabeth, it's very easy to think of LawCare as a charity providing support for legal professionals, which is its raison d'etre. But actually what I heard there was something that was more campaigning, kind of bigger picture about trying to transform a legal services system that feels pretty broken at times.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, because I think that, I know it sounds very lofty, but I think sometimes we lose sight of what legal services are all about. It's not just about having organizations and businesses that make lots of money for the partners or the people that own the business. We're actually providing services that are part of the sort of social contract that we have in society and underpins what many of us take for granted: the protection of our rights, the ability to resolve our disputes. If you've invented something that's novel, that's yours, you're going to benefit from that. There's a system that's going to uphold that. So, that sort of larger piece about the sort of service that the law provides to society is an important one. And I think we need to ensure that we attract and retain a wide range of people in the profession, so we're better able to meet all of those wide needs that are out there.
So you're clearly doing an amazing job, and it's clearly a job that needs to be done. Can we talk a little bit about the kind of like the financials, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Sort of, what's it cost to keep something like LawCare going? Do you have enough? Do you have enough resource?
No,
Do you
we
need
never
more?
have enough.
How can we get people like Gwilym at the top of their game?
Well, so I have several asks, maybe two big ones. One, if you've never heard of LawCare and you're listening to this, go back to your colleagues and tell them about us. Get in touch with us. I can send you articles, information to put on your intranet site, in your weekly newsletter. Get it around your firm that we're here, and the support that we provide. But the other part is, so in terms of financials, our annual income is about £400,000 a year. And most of that funding comes from professional bodies. But increasingly, we are looking to raise income from other avenues like firms and legal organizations. And last year was our best year ever on that front. We raised over £100,000 from non-professional. So up until last year, our income was more around the £320,000, £330,000 mark. We saw a big increase. So we're always interested in organizations that are looking for a charity of the year. I know many organizations want to look outward into their local communities and issues that resonate with staff. But if you're looking for something that could sit alongside that's maybe more internally focused, then we're really interested in those opportunities. We will be launching later this year a new fundraising initiative called the 25 Club for our 25th anniversary, aimed at law firms and corporates about how they could be more supportive of LawCare and make a regular commitment to us and get involved in the work that we do. But I think we operate on a shoestring. Personally, in my biased opinion, I think we punch above our weight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
But we're run on a lot of volunteer effort. Our life in the law research that we did with no funding, but we pulled in leading academics from universities who study mental well-being in the law in the UK, who donated all of their time and effort for free. So we have. Great thing about this work is that there are a lot of people interested in what we do. They gravitate towards us, and people are very generous with their time and their willingness to get involved. So we deliver a lot on the support of lots of volunteers, including people like Andrea Brewster would be a great example of that. We've done lots with Andrea. People just give of their time because they're interested. But yes, raising more money would be great. So anyone listening who's interested in a charitable activity with us, please do get in touch. Very interested to pursue that.
It's got to be a great line to have on your CSR accounts, isn't it? It's got to be.
Yeah. And increasingly, ESG is a big area for businesses. The people and the planet is what matters to the buyers of your services. And firms are so competitive. They're all looking for something that distinguishes them from the firm just down the road that does something quite similar. So how are we different? So I think this is a great opportunity, because when you look at ESG in bigger organizations, there's a lot of focus on the environmental and the governance. You don't always see so much on the social, or it's external rather than internal. And social includes your own people. So, yeah, we can help you.
Gwilym will know if he's read his council papers for this week. I'm trying to make CEPA a little bit more focused on society. I'm going to have a crack.
Yeah. I always read the council papers. I drop everything when they come in. I've got actually a quick topical question. This is genuinely fascinating me. A trend I'm hearing about in the solicitor profession in particular at the moment. Maybe London, particularly London-based thing, I'm not sure. But a lot of the big American firms are hiring more and more and they are pushing up salaries significantly. A lot of the UK firms are saying they have to make major increases on starter and newly qualified salaries and everything to combat that. I mean, great, everyone's being paid more and everything else. Everything I hear about US firms is that they don't, you're not getting paid for nothing. The hours pressures in particular are legendary. And I am wondering whether you're going to get a whole batch of new phone calls from people who are enticed by the fantastic salaries on offer, but possibly going to go into shock when they find out the sort of expectations that are coming. And this whole move seems counter to the general mood at the moment that you've got to balance your life out better. So what do you think is going on?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. And there is, salaries now in some US law firms have passed £160,000 for a newly qualified solicitor. And I think everybody knows that if you're paying someone £160,000, you have to recover that outlay. How do you recover that outlay? Is through the hours that people bill.
Right.
And so people can be set particularly high billing targets, 2,500, 2,700 chargeable hours a year. The further challenge in bigger American law firms, the competitive nature of lawyers, you will then find people wanting to exceed that target because they want to be seen to be the person that's even one step above everybody else, so that when it comes to the partnership check or promotion, they're going to be the ones that get picked. And I think that's a problem in law, that part of our challenge is that we measure success often by output, how many hours we bill, how much money we make, what the profit per partner ratio is, rather than looking at what are the sort of outcomes for our clients. Did we deliver a good service? At what cost was that to individuals? Do people come out of this the other side alive, kind of thing? And I think there is a problem, because you'll see some of those very large firms will have global directors of well-being, and we'll be talking about their mental health and well-being programs, yet people are working 2,500, 3,000 chargeable hours a year. And we know that one of the biggest factors that undermines people's mental health and well-being is working long hours and the pressure that puts people under. And what you're beginning to see with some of the hopping around within firms is young people who may work in UK-based big law firms thinking, well, I might as well go and work there because it's not going to be that much different to what I'm doing here, but I'm going to get paid a lot more. But you're also seeing quite a lot of them leaving. So I think it is a problem, because I think what it shows is that there isn't actually a genuine commitment yet in some sectors of the profession to really looking after safeguarding their greatest asset, which is people. And one of my current obsessions is looking at social media memes. So I follow lots of these lawyer groups on Instagram, TikTok. If you've looked on that, there's quite a lot of stuff on there from lawyers. But when you look at these memes, they're nearly all negative. They're making fun. Some of them are very funny, but they're making fun about what it's like working as a lawyer. Basically, that you don't have a life, no one cares about you, and you're expendable. That's the kind of message that's being put out there about what it's like working at the junior end of the profession. And there's a steady diet of that all the time. And I think the challenge there is it presents a very negative narrative about working in law. And we need to switch that. We need to make it more positive. So I do think it's a big problem. And I think there's a lot of box ticking and values washing that goes on, not only around mental health and well-being, but also around diversity and inclusion. And I think that we still have a lot of work to do to help people actually get why this stuff matters, that it actually can make your business more successful and a better place to work. And it's not just about what your clients and others are expecting to see, that you actually see as an organization, we need to do these things because it makes business sense to do these things.
It fascinates me. It's in such a strange direction to be going. And obviously for people who maybe don't think in charged hours and what that actually means, 2,500 hours a year is basically never taking a holiday and working 10 hours charged. No toilet breaks, no teas, no coffees, 10 hours charged a day for 50 weeks.
Yeah. You see these other things, like there's unlimited holiday. but nobody takes it.
That is outrageous. I've seen that.
There's no such thing as unlimited holiday. I would love that at LawCare. I would quite easily take 3 months off a year and not bat an eyelid.
No, it's disgusting, that, isn't it? Unlimited holiday, all you need to do is just hit your 2,500, take the rest of the year off. In other words, have 3 hours sleep if you're lucky.
Yeah.
That's just.
But you also, on a serious note, is there's a competency issue here, because legal work requires clarity of mind, focus, judgment, making decisions, weighing information up in the balance. If you've worked 50 hours that week and it's Thursday morning and something tricky comes in, you haven't got all of your faculties there firing on all cylinders if you're overworked and you've hardly slept all week. And I think that's where organizations need to be focusing on that. And increasingly, the insurance industry are getting much more interested in culture in legal organizations, because they see that poor culture leads to claims, mistakes, errors.
Oh, that's interesting.
Poor ethical decisions. The only corporate sponsor that LawCare has is an insurance company.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But also, I see them as a great lever for change, because one thing that everybody needs is professional indemnity insurance. You can't practice without it. And it's a hard market for professional indemnity insurance in some sectors, and it's becoming more competitive and harder to get. You're seeing in the States, some insurers are now giving discounts on premiums for professional indemnity insurance if you can demonstrate some good mental health and wellbeing practices in your organization. So I see this as another lever for change, that we've got to come at people from a range of angles. And for most law firms, after their staff bill, their indemnity insurance is going to be one of their biggest costs. So it does get to the seriousness of your competency and your ability to do your job effectively. And, so I think that's another reason why law firms need to wake up, that overworking people to such intense levels is a risk to your business, and it's a risk reputationally as well. So, and in a competitive market for clients and for people, you can't afford that.
Lee, this is a very good podcast.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I'm sat here thinking we could go on forever.
No, it's fascinating.
Well, Elizabeth, we're going to have you back on. I think that's what we're going to need to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to sit here and be asked questions about my dog, my son doing his GCSEs.
we can talk about those things. The question I'm going to ask you, I mean, I'm conscious of time and that we're sort of rattling towards the end that we'd set for ourselves. So we've asked you quite a lot, and Gwilym's particularly been very active this time around, which I'm really grateful for. Are you sat there thinking, I really wish they'd asked me that question? Is there one or two kind of things that you wanted to get across that we've not asked you?
Apart from your dog.
Not really. I think just to reiterate that I would really encourage everyone listening to this to have a look at LawCare's website, think about how you could promote the support we provide within your organization, and think about what step you could take to start actually improving the way you work in your organization, and recognize just how important it is to address these issues and not see mental health and well-being as something that just sits over here as a nice to have, is actually bringing it into the boardroom and the fabric of your organization, because I think it underlies pretty much everything that we all do. And it doesn't take a lot. You don't need to be investing in technology, Fitbits, providing EAPs. It's about providing regular opportunities to check in with people and see how they're doing and supervise them well. And that makes a big difference to people's mental health in the workplace.
What's an EAP?
Employee assistance program.
Okay.
Yeah. So many organizations will signpost people to an EAP provider. You might have a 24-hour counseling.
Yeah. I'm with you. Got it now. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on and spending your time with us. I don't know when the podcast will go out. You and I may have met in person at the kind of the celebratory event, or we may not. Who knows? It might come out after that. But I'm hoping it'll come out around about the right time for you to signpost people to the podcast as part of the anniversary celebrations. We usually end the podcast with me asking Gwilym and our guests a question of some description, and I was trying to think of one that was kind of fits in with the topic, but also is perhaps slightly more lighter than some of the things we've talked about. So Gwilym, apart from having a beer with me or banging out a tune on your bass, because they're going to be your go-tos, aren't they? If you reach kind of peak stress, what's your go-to release?
Oh, I'll go to the gym.
You go to the gym?
I go to the gym, and I get lots more done when I'm really pent up, and I come out feeling pretty good. And then I go and have something to eat, and I don't care about anything. Then it's quite nice.
So how about you, Elizabeth? What's your release?
Mine is very mundane. As I take my dog out for a walk.
We've got to talk about the dog, Lee.
I have to talk about my dog.
We've done it. We've got the dog in.
A crazy border terrier called Tango. But I do practice what we preach. And although it seems so simple, but actually getting outside, getting away from your desk, even if it's for 15 minutes, if you are feeling that, because the sense is usually, I can't go out for my walk, I can't have a lunch break, I've got to get through this document, I've got a deadline to meet. But actually that 15-minute breather will help you come back and be more refreshed and focused and get on with things. So I walking is what I do to clear my head.
Luke, come on.
Oh, me? Well,
I'm going to guess.
Well, I was going to go to squash, but I can't do it because I go to squash all the time. So instead, I'm going to walk down the garden to the workshop where my dartboard hangs, and I'm just going to spend half an hour. I'm rubbish at darts. I love darts, absolutely love darts, but I've never ever been any good at it because I never find the time to practice, and when I do, I get bored within about half an hour or so. But it's usually enough time for me to forget stuff. So I'm going to go down there. I'm going to chuck a few darts. They're going to hit the wall. They're going to hit the light. They're rarely going to trouble the score, and that'll do me.
Do you move the tortoise?
Oh, the tortoise. There are steps up to the workshop that the tortoise can't navigate. Yeah, he's safe. Don't worry, mate. Elizabeth, we're going to get you back on at some point.
I'd be delighted. You've just made me think, I haven't seen, my neighbours have tortoises that come out. Yours must be out of hibernation now, is it?
Oh yeah.
They usually. I haven't seen their tortoises for a long time.
They've got tortoises, have they?
They have two.
Do they not spend most of their time banging shells together?
No, I don't know, because they sit. I have to ask them. They sit out. They live outside in some kind of enclosure thing, and they all get caught up. But I haven't seen them for a long, long time. I sometimes just see them in the garden.
As Gwilym knows, I couldn't possibly have another tortoise because Albert is a bit of a kind of sexual predator, and he so we have Crocs, the kind of like the rubbery plastic shoes in the garden, and he just spends all of his time making love to his harem of Crocs.
There's something very modern about that, Lee.
No, we should close the show. Although I'm sure Lucy's going to keep all of this.
That's not going to be in the show.
Yeah, I'm sure Lucy's going to keep all of this in. So thanks, Elizabeth, for
well, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me. I was really glad to do it, and I look forward to hearing the finished product.
Yeah, it'll be great, and I'll look forward to catch up.
And I'll see you next week at the Royal Courts of Justice. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah,
right.
See you then.
Okay, all right.
Bye.
Ciao. Nice to meet you, Gwilym.
And you, thank you.
All right.